Welcome back. Today we're going to see how easy it is to deploy a real-world Python app to Kubernetes with Jetpack. Here's our real-world app. We can see lots of planes flying in. If we click on one, we get to see the details. So this flight came from Portugal. Here's the call sign, the latitude and longitude, the altitude, velocity. It looks like it's climbing a little bit. Here's one that looks like it might be landing. Yep, it's going down. It flags from Spain. Let's take a look at the code involved. This is up on GitHub, so go to github.com/jetpack-io/python-planes. So we're looking at Jetpack planes. Here's an architecture diagram. We have the OpenSky API. A cron job periodically queries this API to see which flights are overhead right now and caches that in a cache. There's a REST API that reads that cache and makes available to the SPA in the browser so that we can view it. Let's take a look at the code. Here we have our flight map component, and it shows this map detail. Thank you to Leaflet.js for making that possible. We can see that that data is bound to the flights coming from our Flux store. If we flip over to our Flux store, we can see that the Flux store gets populated by querying /API/flight. /API/flight is up here in our API, so let's go to our API. Here in main.py, we can say API flight will read data out of Redis. How does that data get into Redis? Well, we have this cron job that runs periodically. It grabs the data from the OpenSky network, pivots the data to put it into an object instead of a big array, and saves that data into Redis. We're using a cron here to run once a minute, and that cron is made available to us from the Jetpack SDK. So now that we've got this cron that will run every minute, it will put that data into Redis. We'll be able to read that data out of our cache with /API/flight. That will get put into our Flux store and be available to us in our flight component. Now let's see how easy it is to get to Kubernetes. Let's stop this running locally. We'll stop our front end. We'll stop our back end. I've already installed the Jetpack CLI, so I can just use it. We'll start with Jetpack init. Jetpack init will interview us and help us understand details about our application. By default, it uses the name of the folder. I want to change this to Jetpack planes. Is your application a web server? Yes, it is. Do I want it to be publicly routable from the internet? Yes, I do. Now, do we want to use our own cluster, or in this case, I'll use the Jetpack provided cluster. And we've written this jet config. We should commit this jetconfig.yaml into our source control to ensure that we can consistently deploy through Jetpack. Now that we've got our jet config in place, let's do jetpack dev. Jetpack dev will not only launch our application in Kubernetes, it will also stream the logs from our application back into our terminal. After a quick Docker build and push, we'll get our app running inside of Kubernetes. Now that our app is started, we can see this publicly routable URL as well as a proxy into our application and into the Jetpack runtime. Let's pop open this publicly accessible URL and take a look at our application running inside of Kubernetes. We can see the planes moving right now. Let's click on this one. Oh, it looks like it yields from France. Here's its call sign, its latitude and longitude, and it looks like it's descending a little bit. Is there one that just took off? This one looks like it just took off. It yields from Ireland, and here's its call sign. We can take a look at the resources running inside of Kubernetes. We can see the pods associated with our application running, and we can see the cron job that was started. Now, we didn't have to mess with any Kubernetes YAML to make this happen. We just annotated our code to say it was a cron job. This application is available on GitHub at github.com/jetpack-io/python-planes. And get started today at jetpack.io/docs. Thanks for watching.